Hello and welcome to a quick overview of Banshee engine. In this video I will show you how to create a very simple game and show you the basics of the brand new Banshee editor. When you first open up the editor, you will be welcomed with the project manager screen, which lists your most recent projects. I have none, so I'm going to create a brand new project. Once the project has been created and opened, a lot of new elements have just shown up in the editor, and I will explain what these elements do as we go along. The first thing we need in order to create our game are some assets. At minimum, we will need a 3D model and a texture, and I have prepared some already. In order to import 3D models or any kind of resources into Banshee, you can just drag and drop them onto the library folder. If you wish, you can also copy them directly in the File Explorer into the project folder. Once the resource has been imported, you can customize their import options by selecting them in the library window and viewing their options under the inspector window. For example, on this texture we can change whether or not we want to generate bitmaps, or we can change the format of the texture, and similar properties are available for other types of resources. For our purposes, we don't need to change any of these properties. In order to start setting up our scene for our game, we need to add our 3D model into the scene. To do that, you can just select it into the library window and then drag and drop it onto the hierarchy or the scene window. Once the model has been added to the scene, we can see it's all black, and this is because we haven't yet added any lights or textures to it. But we're gonna fix that very soon. The scene view allows you to fly around the scene, select objects and manipulate them using the move, rotate or scale handles. I'm going to reset these values because we don't actually need to change them. I'm gonna move the mesh slightly up so it doesn't conflict with the grid below. Okay, so now we have our 3D model in the scene, but it's not very visible, so let's add a light. To add a light, you can just click on the light icon on the toolbar, and a new point light has just been added. You can see that in the hierarchy and in the scene view. I'm gonna position it better, and I'm gonna increase its intensity. In general, this area will show any properties specific to the selected object in the hierarchy. In this case, it's gonna show a light with its transform and its light component. In the case of the hanger, again, it's gonna show its transform and its renderable component. Now that we have our light, we can see that our 3D model is all gray. The thing we need to do right now is to assign some textures to it. To assign textures to the 3D model, we first need to create a material. To create a material, you can just right click on the library window, go create material, or you can just do it directly by clicking on the toolbar icon. I'm just gonna name this material hanger, and you can see in the inspector now shows the material properties. The first thing to note is the shader field. The shader defines how is the object with the material rendered. A shader is just another resource you can import and then drag and drop onto this field. However, for our purposes, I'm gonna use the default diffuse shader. The default shader accepts an albedo and a normal texture. To assign these textures to the material, you can just drag and drop them from the library folder onto the material slots. Now our material is set up, and we need to assign it to our 3D model. So let's select the 3D model in the scene, then go under the renderable component, expand the materials field, and drag and drop the hanger material from the library onto the field. Once added, our hanger now has a material and looks significantly better. Okay, now we have our 3D model set up, so let's save the scene just in case. The thing to note about Banshee scenes is that they are all saved as prefabs. And prefabs are generic groups of scene objects. This means they can be used not only for scenes, but for any kind of templates you can reuse in your levels. For example, we have just added a material to this hanger mesh, but any other time we want to use this hanger in the scene, we're gonna need to re-add this material on the component. If we wish to avoid this, we can create a prefab of the hanger. To create a prefab, you can just drag and drop its scene object onto the library folder. Now that the prefab has been created, you can then just drag and drop it into the scene and use it wherever you wish without having to assign the material ever again. This of course works with significantly more complex objects. Prefabs can be nested within each other, which can make maintaining complex levels much simpler. It can also make working on one big level much easier if you have multiple people editing the level at the same time. Okay, so we now have our level, it's saved, but we still can't interact with the level. The first thing we need to add is a way for the player to see the level. This camera right here is a debug camera, it's not what the actual player sees. The game view shows what the player sees, and what we can see right here is that we have no camera in the scene. To add a camera to the scene, you can just click on the camera icon on the toolbar. And the camera has just been added, but it's not very well positioned. I'm gonna split this view so it allows me to see both of them at the same time. And I'm gonna move the camera in the scene view so to a better height. Okay, this looks fine. I'm gonna collapse this back. Now that we have our camera, our player can now see the level but still can't interact with it. In order for him to interact with the level, we need to add a script. I have already prepared a simple script that allows the player to walk with the WASD keys and view the scene with the mouse. In order to import scripts into the project, you can just drag and drop them into the library like any other resource. Once the script was imported, you might have noticed down here that it was recompiling the editor. Now the script is usable, but before we use it, I'm gonna show you integration of the Banshee editor with external code editors. For example, in my case, if I double-click the script, it's gonna open up my Visual Studio instance. The first time it does this, it's a bit slow. It's gonna take a few seconds, but any other time it's gonna be instantaneous. So here we see our script, and the cool thing is that the editor integrates with Visual Studio. So for example, if I make an error in the script, then go back to the editor, it's gonna report it directly here in the log, and if I double click it in the log, it's just gonna bring me back to the exact line where the error was made. And this works for compile errors, for runtime errors, for the bug messages is similar, and it's going to show you the entire call stack. So you can easily write code in your favorite code editor and then switch back and forth between the Banshee editor, so you can easily write code and test it. Okay, so we now have our component, so let's add it to the scene. Select the camera in the hierarchy and then just drag and drop our component onto the inspector. As we can see, our component has been added, but it has some properties we can change. Now if we go back to Visual Studio, we can see these properties are just basic script fields. In this graphical user interface were generated automatically. This means your programmer doesn't need to write any additional code to allow artists and designers to customize properties of your custom script objects. These properties will also automatically be saved and loaded. This means the programmer also doesn't have to write any serialization or deserialization code, which can make life significantly easier. Now that our component has been added, everything should be ready for the player to move around the scene. The way we can test that is to use the Play in Editor functionality. So just click on the play icon on the toolbar, and we can now play the game in the editor. However, it's moving pretty slow, so I'm just gonna increase these values right here. And that's the cool thing about Banshee, is you can change the game as you play it, whether in Inspector or whether in the scene. You can also fly around, select objects, move objects, and similar, while the game is playing. Okay, our game seems to be working, and we might be ready to publish it to our user. So let's exit play mode. I'm gonna actually just reapply these values because I forgot to save them. And I'm gonna save our scene once again. Once you're done with development, you want to publish the game to your user, you can go to the build window, which handles all the building of the game for you. It will package all the resources and output an executable you can use to run the game. The only thing you need to do is assign it a startup scene. So I'm gonna assign it our hangar scene. I'm also gonna make it not full screen so it doesn't mess with my recording, and I'm gonna add a title. You can also include various other resources other than the startup scene, but I'm not gonna show you that in this video. When ready, just hit build, and your game will be created for you. Now we can run the game and test if everything still works, which it appears to work. And that's it, guys. This has been the basic overview of the Banshee editor. If you want to know more about Banshee or test the editor yourself, you can go and follow the link shown on the screen right now. Goodbye.